Hi Eddie.
Hi, Razor.
You didn't have Anthony Gordon available for you at Stamford Bridge on Sunday. Has he been for a scan and how is he?
He has been for a scan. We're hopeful the injury isn't serious. We didn't think it was when he initially did it. Let's see how he is today.
Is it a training ground injury or was it sustained in a game?
No, it was in training. I think it was, losing track of my days now, I think it was Friday. But it didn't become necessarily obvious to us until Saturday, when he was probably worse than he initially thought it was. But yeah, nothing serious. It's one of those things that you sometimes get from time to time. Players can play with or not play with, and I just felt he felt it was too much for him on Sunday to play.
So is there any chance that he might feature this week?
Yeah, there is, but of course we have to make the right decision. We have Arsenal coming up very quickly, so it's just about making sure that we don't do any further damage to him.
Before I ask you about the cup tie, I just want to return to something that you talked about after the match on Sunday and expand on that regarding Sandro Tonali, because when he's been substituted in the last two games, Chelsea and Brighton, some supporters have booed the decision to take him off. Not necessarily a reflection of who's coming on to replace him, but you're obviously trying to make a positive change and it gets that reaction. How do you feel about that as the manager?
I think, firstly, I love the fact that supporters regard Sandro in the highest esteem as I do. That for me is really pleasing. I think that the only thing I would ask is that any frustrations towards me or any decisions are sort of reflected after the game, not in the moment. I think it's difficult then for the players coming onto the pitch. Not that it should necessarily affect their performance, but it just does create an element of doubt. I think that the difficult decision I have, especially in midfield, is we've got three outstanding players starting the game and then you're losing the game and you're trying to make changes that you feel can help us without leaving it too late. Also, I think there's always a thing in my mind where you give a player 10 minutes and they don't really get into the game, they don't find their rhythm. So it's a delicate balance. To do that, I either have to take a wide player off or one of the midfield players off or both, depending on how many players I bring on. I am a manager that likes to make early changes, especially if we're chasing a game. I've got experience and history behind that to give the players coming onto the pitch the best opportunity to perform. Then someone has to come off. And that, when you look at our team, that's a difficult decision because wherever you're looking, especially if you're making a change in midfield, it's difficult. I think ultimately I've judged it on goals and creativity and trying to get as many of them in the team as we chase a game as I can.
And you had three important midfield players on the bench on Sunday as well, with Lewis Miley back, Joe Willock and Sean Longstaff. A lot of the fan discussion over the last couple of weeks, and I think particularly since Sunday, has been about how the midfield is functioning, because you've got three big players starting games in there for you, others available to come on. Are you happy with how the midfield is working together and the blend that you've got in there?
Yeah, I am. I don't think it's necessarily absolutely perfect at the moment because the results would tell you it's not. But I think as you look at the team functioning, and especially in the last three performances, I'd say in the main we've been good. We have been creating chances. We have been more than competitive in the games. So I don't see, looking at the team, there's something drastically wrong. I think confidence now may be beginning to be an issue. But of course, we're always looking at things and going, how can we make this better? I think we had a few positional issues on Sunday that we'll, of course, sit down with the players and discuss, but nothing that wouldn't ordinarily happen anyway.
The cup tie then against Chelsea, I'm sure you're happier to be at home than to play the match away. How excited are you for it? Because it could be the perfect opportunity for you to get a big result. Yeah,
I think always with these spells of games, I think you want more games to come. So for us, the frustration of Sunday is still there, still that feeling of what could have been. It was another game that got away from us, and you sort of, there's some key moments that you look back after the game and you reflect on, and you knew they're big at the time, but then they're even bigger when you're watching it back and you know the result. So that frustration we need to turn into positive energy. We need to turn into motivation and fuel for future performances. We're always excited to play, and we're always excited to play at home in front of our brilliant supporters, and we need to make it a real occasion if we can.
And irrespective, finally, of what happens in the Premier League, how important does the League Cup remain to you and your players?
Well, it's been an important competition for us since we've been here, and that's not changed. That will be reflected in how we go. We'll try and pick a team that we think can win the game. Chelsea are dangerous opponents and difficult opponents, as we saw on Sunday. I've got no doubt they will possibly make changes to their team, but those changes will still be a very strong team.
Thank you. Keith?
Hi, Eddie.
Hi.
Oh, phone's ringing. Right on time. You said there that the blend isn't quite perfect at the moment between the midfield three, but you think it will get there. Are you able to just expand on what you think needs to come from the three players working in tandem to get them to where you want them to be?
Yeah, I think where I was going with the answer was that the results will say the blend isn't great, but I think actually our general performances in midfield, I haven't had an issue with necessarily how we performed. My making changes just to try and get a goal and to try and chase the game. But I don't necessarily have a negative issue with our midfield. I think our midfield has got three outstanding players, starting players that played, three outstanding players. Relationships do take time to build. These things don't necessarily happen overnight, but I've seen enough to know that those three players can work in tandem together well.
And if confidence is beginning to be a bit of an issue, like you said a moment ago, what do you do to address that and to try and ensure that that's the last thing they're thinking or the last thing they're worried about?
Yeah, I think with confidence, I think the environment has to be a friendly one, a happy one, while also acknowledging the spell of results we've had. So a reflection of that, a good working environment. I think that's what we always try to create for the players, and I think then our qualities will show through. And I think, again, if you look at the last three games, we could have easily have won all three games and be sat here with a very different feeling. And I think it's my job to take a very logical view at things and not panic and overreact. I think if we were performing as we were early season and getting the results that we were getting, then there'd be a bigger issue.
This game has the feeling of a big one due to the fact that you want to win trophies, the players want to win trophies. You've said that a number of times. Is there a feeling that if you win this tomorrow night, it can kickstart your season and then you bounce into that match against Arsenal at the weekend?
Yeah, I think there's a feeling that one win always changes everything. We hoped that would be Sunday. It wasn't. Now we hope it's Wednesday. And you're right, a cup competition can sometimes bring just a different feeling, a different objective. We know that this competition, as I said, has had a positive association with us in the last couple of seasons. Quarterfinals last year, it could have been very different. The final the year before. So we're desperate to progress.
Can I ask you I know you've got enough on your plate here at Newcastle, but can I just ask you one at another club, just because we're asking the other managers today, what was your take on Erik ten Hag leaving Manchester United after a couple of years in the job? I know you guys have come up against each other, particularly in the cup final.
Yeah, I think that always sadness when a manager loses his job. I think you have empathy for anyone in that position because you know the strains, you know the challenges, and every club's different. Certainly, the job at the very highest level doesn't get any easier at any club. So, felt for Erik yesterday.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Cheers, Eddie.
Look north.
Hi, Eddie. Reflecting on Sunday's game at Chelsea, had Cole Palmer not been playing, do you think you'd won?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. I mean, I thought he played very well. You can see he's playing with real confidence. I thought he was a player that we probably didn't do enough to stop, especially on transitions. Not so much in the other phases of play, but on transitions we found him really elusive. Created the first goal in that fashion, scored the second goal in that fashion. So, look, he's an outstanding talent, and we probably didn't deal with him well enough.
So, if he's on the team sheet tomorrow, how do you deal with him?
Well, we learn the lessons as always. We've analysed and reflected, and we'll pass that information on to the players, and then we'll of course endeavour to do better. But I think it's not about one player; it's about collectively as a team defending better than we did, especially in the opening 20 minutes where we didn't look as solid and as unified as we have done defensively in recent weeks. I thought we did better as the game went on. The last 60 minutes, I thought we defended a lot more securely, albeit conceded a second.
And finally, how up are the players for this match tomorrow?
Yeah, we will be. I think there's still we're still digesting Sunday's game, but very quickly in football you have to turn to the next game, and my attention turned to it after watching the game on Sunday night, analysing, preparing. Although the same opponent, possibly a different team, possibly a different way of going, who knows? So we need to be ready for the match.
Thank you. We'll go to Lee Ryder and then to Jordan Cronin.
Morning, Eddie.
Hi, Lee.
Just on the changes that were made in the summer with James Bunce coming in and Paul Mitchell, when you're on a bad run, does this actually help a little bit because they can feed that information back to the people at the top in Saudi Arabia?
What do you mean, Lee? Sorry.
In terms of, understanding the situation, the technical part of it, it's not just about results, it's about what's happening behind the scenes as well, and they're in a position to feed that data back to the people that make the ultimate decisions. Yeah,
it's every club's unique, and those relationships with James. I mean, James is more on the physical side. He's at the training ground every day, sees everything that we do with the players, and of course he's helping implement new strategies to improve our injury record, keep more players fit. And I think that work's been impressive, and certainly I think we're moving in the right direction, albeit there'll always be injuries, but it's trying to keep those to a minimum. In terms of feeding everything else back, yeah, I'm sure Paul will be doing that, and doing that in an effective way. But we're all one team, we're all working for the same cause, which is to try and produce a winning team.
Yeah, I was going to say, has it been very much a sort of collective responsibility in the aftermath of Chelsea?
Between me and the players?
You, the players, Paul Mitchell, James Bunce?
Well, me and the players, yeah, mainly. I think, as I say, that James is on the physical side. Paul will be doing lots of other bits. He's not necessarily involved in the day-to-day aspects in terms of with the players. So I think me and the players will be very honest with each other. We'll come together, and then we'll fight back. That's what we always do. That's what we always have to do. You always get another opportunity to improve. We're looking to improve consistently. I've got no doubt we will.
Just on the potential changes you could make, does Lewis Miley come into your consideration for this one?
He does, albeit we've got to be really careful with Louis. We've got to manage him right. I think last week, if I think back to the Brighton game, he was probably on the bench ahead of time where we thought he would be. He trained well, no problem with his training performances. He's looked really good. But just in respect to the injuries that he's had, we've got to be really careful and manage his minutes. So I'll be taking guidance by the experts to make sure that we don't push him too quickly.
Okay, we'll go to Jordan and Joe and then Ian. Jordan?
Hi Eddie, just going back to Sunday, there was a stat doing the rounds that Newcastle have had 50 corners this season and haven't scored from one. Why has the team become less effective from set pieces this season?
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily aware of that stat presented like that, but I was certainly aware that we hadn't scored from a corner. Probably wasn't aware of the number that we'd had. I think we've had chances. We've had a lot of chances. I hate to use XG and try and be clever in my response, but our XG from set plays actually isn't too bad. It's competitive, so we should have scored more than we have, or should have scored at least one. I think it's a twofold thing, because I'm well aware I don't think we've been as potent as we have been previously. I think we're missing maybe a couple of key corner takers. So Trips, for me, has been a consistent source of goals for us. Outstanding delivery, whether that's wide free kicks or corners. And also the height we have in the team. I think we're missing a little bit of the height that we've had previously. And strength of headers, really. I think Sven's always been a big miss for us. Not so much in him being, say, necessarily a focal target, but just he's 6'4", 6'5", and then when you add Dan Burn and other players into the mix to go with his height, you become a lot stronger team from set plays. Callum Wilson would add to that as well. So I think a mixture of those two things, but we have to do better. It has to be a source of goals. I think it always has been for us historically. So we're constantly tweaking what we do, and that will probably, no doubt, have to evolve again.
I think there's a lot of teams in the Premier League these days who actually have specialised set-piece coaches just focus purely on that. What is your view on that, and would you consider a similar appointment to your backroom team to maybe just focus on that? Yeah,
it's something we have discussed and looked at and talked with the club about. I think we have an analyst, set play analyst, who's very, very good. Kieran does a lot of work with Jason regarding our set plays. They work incredibly hard to try and improve our product from our corners and set plays, but also from a defensive viewpoint, which we've not been too bad with this year. So a lot of work goes into them. We practice them a lot. Sometimes you go on runs where you score. Sometimes you go on runs where you don't. But we do know that it's an area that we need to contribute because it can win you games. It can really make the difference, as other teams had found out this year.
Thanks, Jordan. Joe?
Hi Eddie, just back on Lewis Smiley, what do you see his role in being this season? Obviously he played a lot more minutes than expected last year. What do you see for him when he gets fully back to fitness?
Well, he's an outstanding player, and I think he's shown that coming back to training. You expect to see some rustiness from him technically, or some physical development still to go. I think he's come back physically looking like a changed athlete, really. He looks a lot more solid and filled out, which naturally will happen as he gets older, but looks like he's used his time away from the training pitch really well. And technically he's been really, really good. So I've got no issue with his game. I think he looks in a really good place. It's just a case of managing. He's still very young. He's had a couple of injuries that have reflected on maybe we overused him last year, and we don't want him to get injured again. So I think small steps initially for Louis, but hopefully he can progress into playing some big minutes for us.
And obviously a cup game you'll play your strongest team, I'm sure, but someone like Bruno, obviously he's played a lot of minutes over the past year and a bit. Is there potential to rotate him, or is he such a big part that he's sort of undroppable?
No one's undroppable. I think you make a valid point on Bruno's minutes. He's travelling. He's done a lot. He's always been there for us. So we need to make sure we manage him well. We need to make sure we manage the other players who've had a lot of minutes well. We need to still produce a really strong team that can win the game. So I've got a lot to think about between now and kick-off.
Ian Merton?
Morning, Eddie.
Morning.
Enzo Maresca will probably think he's got a fair idea of who plays for Newcastle and how Newcastle played tomorrow. Very different for you because obviously they've got such an enormous squad. You don't know who will be in the Chelsea lineup. Does that make preparations for you tougher?
I think that with the analysis we have now and everybody has on each other, I think there's a very few surprises. But I think this is one game where they could play any one of their squad. They could make wholesale changes. They could make one or two changes. We really don't know. We'll plan for what we do know. We'll plan for what we need to do, maybe more than what the opposition will do. We know that there's certain aspects of our performance that we have to get right to win, and so that will be our focus.
And you mentioned earlier the influence of Cole Palmer and how you failed to deal with him. Do you almost have to prepare the team for two different games, one if Palmer's playing and one if he's not?
No, I don't think it's necessarily like that. I think, as I said, regarding Cole, I thought he played very well. I'm sure he'd be pleased with his performance on the day. He's influenced the game. We will analyse it and look to do better regarding a player in that position. But I think regardless of who they play, if they do change, we'll need to do a better job, as I say, especially on transitions.
Thanks, Ian. We'll go to George, then Dominic, and then Craig.
Hi, Eddie.
Hi, George.
You referenced getting to the quarter-final last season. Of course, it was Chelsea you played. Was that another one of those games that kind of got away, and how much did it sting, and can that be fuel this time around?
Yeah, it was a painful one because right at the end of the game, we almost felt we were in the semi-finals in that moment, and the game turned so quickly in the sense that they scored, then it went to penalties, and we hadn't really regrouped, I didn't think, mentally from conceding so late. And it was a missed opportunity for us because it's so difficult to get to the latter stages of any cup competition, and we felt we were sort of had one foot in there. So I think this game's totally different. They're a different team, different manager, but certainly you always learn from those moments. I think you take them with you, the scars and the experiences of difficult moments, but it actually helps you and makes you a better team, and all those experiences will hopefully help us the next time we're in that position.
Thanks, George. Dominic?
Hi, Eddie. I know it's a couple of months off, but how much planning has gone into the January window?
I'd say a very small part, really. Certainly from my input at the moment, we're in a flood of games. I'm focusing very much on the team, the training, the players that we have. We've had a couple of internal meetings behind the scenes, but no more than that.
When does your kind of input step up on that, and does it feel like it'll be an important window?
I think they're all important windows. I don't think there's one that you go, well, that's not an important one for us, because you never know what's going to happen. So I think my part in that will probably take prominence maybe towards the end of November, I would say. At the moment, there'll probably be a lot of work being done behind the scenes that I'm not necessarily a part of. But I'm sure I'll begin to, as I say, get involved probably towards the end of November, early December.
Thanks, Dominic. Craig?
Morning, Eddie. Is it too early to call a game like this tomorrow night, given the absence of European football? Is it too early to call it season-defining tomorrow?
You can call it whatever you want. I've got no issue with that. I think from our side, look, we know every game's hugely important. Every game has a bearing on your season in terms of either momentum, feeling, emotions. We know we need a result. We know we need a performance. Ideally both together. This will be a great time to do it from our perspective. We're at home. We've got 2 massive home games to come. I'd love to think that St James's Park will be absolutely rocking for both games. And we need the players to thrive in that environment.
And just going back to Sandro as well, you said something on Sunday that there is more to come. What does more look like from Sandro?
I think there's more to come from not just Sandro, from everybody. I don't think I was talking in reference to him, but of course there's more to come from him. There's more to come from the whole team. I think more to come from him means more influence on the game. Certainly technically he's an outstanding player. To see that technical ability, we want him to get the ball more. Playing as an 8, we need more of a goal threat as well. That's such a key thing for the players in those positions. We've struggled for goals as a team. We need goals from every angle that we can get them. Going back to the set play question earlier, so wherever the goals come from, we'll take, and certainly everyone has to contribute to that.
Okay, any more? Simon?
Hi, Eddie. Is it hard leading a club? You've led the club on a massive upswing. Is it harder leading it on a kind of slight dip and a downswing at the moment? Or do you not feel it's a downswing?
I think leadership is. I think it's hard in any moment. Genuinely, and I've always felt that good moments, perceived bad moments, swings, momentum. But I think that's where you need consistency, and I think that's what people look for in a leader. They look for how you're going to react in this moment, and I think big sways of emotion can be really negative. So I think for me in this moment, it's very important that I back the players. I show strength. I show calmness. I believe in what we're doing, but not blindlessly carrying on if things aren't working. I think I've got to be adaptable as well. I'll try to make the right decision always for the team, but I think unity is the most important thing, and I've said that in the summer, and it's the hardest thing when the team maybe isn't getting the results that we all want, is to stay unified. But I think the supporters especially have been incredible. You look at the supporters at Stamford Bridge, and people talk about the reaction to Sandro's substitution, and I understand that. But the reaction at the end of the game was incredible. And it's not the first time they've backed us in defeat or difficult runs. It means so much to us because it gives us the best chance to fight back as quickly as possible.
You might have just answered this next one a little bit, but to anyone having a moan, what do you say to them to give them energy and a bit of optimism in the next week?
Look, moaning's part of human life. Everyone does it. I do it. Try not to, but I do. I I think it's a natural human reaction. I think the responsibility always lies with us to change those moans into a positive outcome. That's what we'll try to do in our next game. It's the only thing we can do. And a lot of that will come from our attitude and our body language and our intent. Our intent has to be, we're giving everything to the cause, win, lose or draw. We'll leave nothing behind when we enter the pitch.